を強くするんだ。 Break out take 風を裂いてまだ見ぬ空へ Reach my way 始まりの鐘が響いた。さあ奇跡を起こせ。カウントダウン史上最高、目の前に広がる希望、誰も知らないストーリーが僕を呼んでるんだ。 Step up fly high 変えてゆけ、限界さえも Change my way この瞬間こそ奇跡だ。広がる希望、誰も知らないストーリーが僕を呼んでるんだ。 Step up fly high 超えてゆけ、限界さえも Change my way この瞬間こそ奇跡だ。ここから始まるニューデイ、退屈なページ破り捨てたら世界はもう会ってくれない。ためらう時間なんていらない、この手で描くよフューチャー。カウントダウンフリーズは最高、目の前に広がる希望、誰も知らないストーリーが僕を呼んでるんだ。ステップアップフライハイ超えてゆけ、限界さえもChange my way この瞬間こそ奇跡だ。さあ新しい僕へ閉ざしたドアの向こう側に光るチャンスが待ってる。恐れるふりはもうやめにして翼を広げて Take off。 悔しさだって無駄じゃないから、涙のデュも抱きしめて、この鼓動が導く方へ迷わず進むよフューチャー。カウントダウン質は最高、目の前に広がる希望、誰も知らないストーリーが僕を呼んでるんだ。ステップアップフライハイ超えてゆけ、限界さえも Change my way この瞬間こそ奇跡だ。さあ新しい僕へたとえ嵐が吹き荒れても信じた夢は消えない。 跡だ瞬間こそ奇跡だ始まるニューデイ退屈なページ破り捨てたら世界はもうあってくれないためらう時間なんていらないこの手で描くよフューチャーカウンターフリーズは最高目の前に広がる希望誰も知らないストーリーが僕を呼んでるんだステップアップフライハイ超えてゆけ限界さえもチェンジマイウェイこの瞬間こそ奇跡ださあ新しい僕へ閉ざしたドアの向こう側に光るチャンスが待ってる恐れるふりはもうやめにして翼を広げてテイクオフ悔しさだって無駄じゃないから涙のデュも抱きしめてこの鼓動が導く方へ迷わず進むよフューチャーカウンター実は最高目の前に広がる希望誰も知らないストーリーが僕を呼んでるんだステップアップフライハイ超えてゆけ限界さえもチェンジマイウェイこの瞬間こそ奇跡ださあ新しい僕へたとえ嵐が吹き荒れても信じた夢は消えない昨日の僕にさよならして進めどこまでも簡単集中は今違うこの手で掴むよ未来涙も笑顔も全てが僕を強くするんだ Break out take off 風を裂いてまだ見ぬ空へ Reach my way 始まりの鐘が響いたさあ奇跡を起こせカウンターステージは最高目の前に広がる希望誰も知らないストーリーが僕を呼んでるんだステップアップフライハイ変えてゆけ限界さえもチェンジマイウェイこの瞬間こそ奇跡だカウンター実は最高目の前に広がる この瞬間こそ奇跡だ始まるニューデイ退屈なページ破り捨てたら世界はもう会ってくれないためらう時間なんていらないこの手で描くよフューチャーカウンタウンフリーズは最高目の前に広がる希望誰も知らないストーリーが僕を呼んでるんだステップアップフライハイ超えてゆけ限界さえもチェンジマイウェイこの瞬間こそ奇跡ださあ新しい僕へ
Hello, peoples. Good morning. I was trying to figure out why Frosted still had my old username. I thought I fixed that. Apparently, I did not. Okay. I don't know how to fix that. I think it's just a Frosty Tool thing. Hold on. Frosty Tool. That's not what I meant to do, but okay. Yeah, I don't know. Can't find the setting for this. Anyway, today we'll be continuing Sherlock Holmes. I might try to get through 3 stories. So next week we could just read the 3 stories and then we'll be done. And then we could go to whatever's the next story in my list of Sherlock Holmes. I forgot the order already. I think the next one is supposed to be so after the Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. Let's see here. So after the Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, so we did a Study in Scarlet already. We did the Sign of 4. Then it's the Memoir of Sherlock Holmes, I believe, is the next one. I believe that's the order. We don't want publication order. I want Well, actually, this is this publication. Hold on. Studying Scarlet, The Sign of Fours, which we did. We're doing the Adventure Sherlock Holmes memoirs. We read The Hounds of Baskerville already. That is going to be The Return of Sherlock Holmes, The Valley of Fear, then His Last Vow, and then The Case Book of Sherlock Holmes. Okay, those are the short stories. Okay, studies Charlotte, The Adventure Sherlock Holmes, The Sign of Four. We read The Sign of Four already. The Hound. Okay, so I'm gonna save this list because I'm gonna forget each time. Okie dokie. So today we are going to be returning to the Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. So we'll be reading The Adventures of the Blue Carbuncle and The Adventures of the Speckled Band. Those are the first two, and depending how far we get, then we also read The Adventures of the Engineers Them. Okay. So this one is The Adventures of the Blue Carbuncle. I had called upon my friend Sherlock Holmes. Let me move this. let me move this first. I can't see chat. Okay. I had called upon my friend Sherlock Holmes upon the second morning after Christmas, with the intention of wishing him the compliments of the season. He was lying upon the sofa in a purple dressing gown, a pipe rack within his reach upon the right, and a pile of crumbled morning papers, evidently newly studied, never at hand. Beside the couch was a wooden chair, and on the angle of the back hung a very steady and reputable hard felt hat, much the worse for wear, and cracked in several places. A lens and a forceps lying upon the seat of the chair suggested that the hat had been suspended in this manner for the purpose of examination. "You are engaged," said I. "Perhaps I interrupted you." "Not at all. I am glad to have a friend with whom I can discuss my results. The matter is a perfectly trivial one." He jerked his thumb in the direction of the old hat. "But there are points in connection with it which are not evidently devoid of interest and even of obstructions." I seated myself in his armchair and warmed my hands before his crackling fire, for a sharp frost had set in, and the windows were thick with icicles. "I suppose," I remarked, that only as it looks, this thing has some deadly story linked onto it. That it is the clue which will guide you in the solution of many mysteries and the punishment of some crime. No crime, says Sherlock Holmes, laughing. Only one of those little incidents, which will happen when you have 400 humans being all jostling each other within the space of a few square miles. Amid the action and reaction of so dense a swarm of humanity, every possible combination of events may be expected to take place, and many a little problem will be presented which may be striking and bizarre without being criminal. We have already had experience of such. So much so, I remark, that of the last 6 cases, which I have added to my notes, 3 have been entirely free of any legal crime. Precisely. You allude to my attempt to recover the ironing out of the papers, to the singular case of Miss Mary Butterland, and to the adventure of the man with the twisted lip. Well, I have no doubt that this small matter will fall into the same innocent category. You know Peterson, the commissioner? Yes. It is to him that the trophy belongs. It is his hat. No, he found it. Its owner is unknown. I beg that you will look upon it not as a battered billycock, but as an intellectual problem. And first, as to how it came here. It arrived upon Christmas morning in a company with a good fat goose, which is, I have no doubt, roasting at this moment in front of Peterson's fire. The facts are these. About 4 o'clock on Christmas morning, Peterson, who, as you know, is a very honest fellow, was returning from some small jollification and was making his way homeward down the Tottenham Court Road. In front of him he saw, in the gaslight, a tallish man, walking with a slight stagger and carrying a white goose slung over his shoulder. As he reached the corner of God Street, a row broke out between the stranger and a little knot of rough. One of the latter knocked off the man's hat, on which he raised his stick to defend himself, and swinging it over his head, smashed the shop window behind him. Peterson had rushed forward to protect the stranger from his assailant, but the man, shocked at having broken the window and seeing an official looking person in uniform rushing towards him, dropped his goose, took to his heels, and vanished amid the labyrinth of small streets which lie at the back of the Tottenham Court Road. The rest had also fled at the appearance of Peterson, so that he was left in possession of the field of battle, and also of the spoils of victory in the shape of his battered hat and a most unimpeachable Christmas goose, which surely he restored to their owner. My dear fellow, there lies the problem. It is true that poor Miss Henry Baker was printed upon a small card which was tied to the bird's left leg, and it is also true that the initials HB are legible upon the lining of this hat, but as there are some thousands of Bakers and some hundreds of Henry Bakers in this city of ours, it is not easy to restore lost property to any one of them. What then did Peterson do? He brought round both hat and goose to me on Christmas morning, knowing that even the smallest problems are of interest to me. The goose we retained until this morning, when there were signs that in spite of the slight frost, it would be well that it should be eaten without unnecessary delay. Its finder had carried it off, therefore to fulfill the ultimate destiny of a goose, while I continued to retain the hat of the unknown gentleman who lost his Christmas dinner. Did he not advertise? No. Then what clue would you have as to his identity? Only as much as we can deduct. From his hat? Precisely. But you are joking. What can you gather from this old, battered felt? Here is my lens. You know my methods. What can you gather yourself as to this, into the individuality of the man who has worn this article? I took the tattered object in my hands and turned it over rather ruefully. It was a very ordinary black hat, of the usual round shape, hard, and much the worse for wear. The lining had been of red silk, but was a good deal discolored. There was no marker name, but as Holmes had remarked, the initials HB were scrawled upon one side. It was pieced in the brim where it had secure, but the elastic was missing. For the rest, it was cracked, exceedingly dusted, and spotted in several places. Oh, but though, there seemed to have been some attempt to hide these discolored patches by smearing them with ink. I could see nothing, said I, handing it back to my friend. On the contrary, Watson, you can see everything. You fail, however, to reason from what you see. You are too timid in drawing your inferences. Then pray tell me what it is that you can infer from this hat. He picked it up and gazed at it in a peculiar, introspective fashion, which was characteristic of him. It is perhaps less suggestive than it might have been, he remarked, and yet there are a few inferences which are very distinct, and a few others which represent at least a strong balance of probability. That the man was highly intellectual is of course obvious upon the face of it, and also that he was fairly well to do within the last 3 years, although he has now fallen upon evil deeds. He had foresight, but has less now than formerly, pointing to a moral retrogression, which, when taken with the decline of his fortunes, seems to indicate some evil influence, probably drink, at work upon him. This may account also for the obvious fact that his wife has ceased to love him. My dear Holmes, he has, however, retained some degree of self-respect, he continued, disregarding my trance. He is a man who leads a sedentary life, goes out little, is out of training entirely, is middle age, has grizzled hair, which he has cut into the last few days. Oh, he cut within the last few days, in which he annotates with lime cream. These are the more patent facts that which are to be deducted from his hat. Also, by the way, that it is extremely improbable that he has gas laid on in his house. You are certainly joking, Holmes. Not in the least. It is possible that even now, when I give you the results, you are unable to see how they are attained. I have no doubt that I am very stupid, but I must confess that I am unable to follow you. For example, how did you deduct that this man was intellectual? For answer, Holmes clapped the hat upon his head It came right over the forehead and settled upon the bridge of his nose. "It is a question of the cubic capacity," said he. "A man with so large a brain must have something in it." The decline of his fortune, then? This hat is 3 years old. These felt brims, curled at the edge, came in then. It is a hat of the very best quality. Look at the brand of the ribbon silk and the excellent lining. If this man could afford to buy so expensive a hat 3 years ago, and has had no hat since, then he has assuredly gone down in the world. Well, that is clear enough, certainly. But how about the foresight and the moral regression? Sherlock Holmes laughed. "Here is the foresight," said he, putting his fingers upon the little diskin loop of the hat secure. "They are never sold upon hats. If this man ordered one, it is a sign of a certain amount of foresight. Thence he went out of his way to take the precaution against the wind." But since we see that he has broken the elastic and has not troubled to replace it, it is obvious that he has less foresight now than formerly, which is a distinct proof of a weakening nature. On the other hand, he has endeavored to conceal some of these stains upon the felt by dabbing them with ink, which is a sign that he has not entirely lost his self-respect. Your reasoning is certainly plausible. The further points that he is middle-aged, that his hair is grizzled, that he has been readily cut, and that he uses lime cream, are all to be gathered from a close examination of the lower part of the lining. The lines disclose a large amount of hair ends, clean cut by the scissors of a barber. They all appear to be adhesive, and there is a distinct odor of lime cream. This dust, you will observe, is not the gritty gray dust of the street, but the fluffy brown dust of the house, showing that it has been hung up indoors most of the time. All the marks of the moisture upon the inside are proof positive that the wearer perspired very freely and could therefore hardly be in the best of training. But his wife, you said that she has ceased to love him? This hat has not been brushed for weeks. When I see you, my dear Watson, with a weak accumulation of dust upon your hat, and when your wife allows you to go out in such a state, I shall fear that you also have been unfortunate enough to lose your wife's attention. But he must be a bachelor. Nah, he was bringing home the goose as a peace offering to his wife. Remember the card upon the bird's leg? You have an answer to everything, but how on earth do you deduce that the gas is not laid on in his house? One tallow stain, or even two, might come by chance, but when I see no less than 5, I think that there can be little doubt that the individual must be brought into frequent contact with burning tallow, walks upstairs at night, probably with his hat in one hand and a guttering candle in the other. Anyhow, he never got a tallow stain from a gas jet. You satisfied? Well, it is very ingenious, said I, laughing. But since you said just now there has been no crime committed and no harm done save the loss of a goose, well, this seems to be rather a waste of energy. Sherlock Holmes had opened his mouth to reply when the door flew open and Peterson, the commissionaire, rushed into the apartment with flushed cheeks and the face of a man who was dazed from astonishment. "The goose, Mr. Holmes! The goose, sir!" he gasped. "Eh? What of it then? Has it returned to life and flapped off through the kitchen window?" Holmes twisted himself around upon the sofa to get a fair view of the man's excited face. "See here, sir. See what my wife found in his crop." He held out his hand and displayed upon the center of the palm a brilliantly scintillating blue stone, rather smaller than a bean in size, but of such purity of radiance that it twinkled like an electric point in the dark hollow of his hand. Sherlock Holmes sat up with a whistle. "By Jove, Peterson," said he. "This is treasure trove indeed. I suppose you know what you have got." "A diamond, sir. A precious stone. It cuts into glass as though it were putty." "It's more than precious stone. It is the precious stone." "Not the Countess of Mocar Blue, Carbuncle," I ejaculated. "Precisely so. I want to know its size and shape, seeing that I have read the advertisement about it in the Times every day lately. It is absolutely unique, and its value can only be conjectured, but the reward offered of £1,000 is certainly not within a 20th part of the market price." £1,000? Great Lord of mercy! Commissioner plumped down into a chair and stared from one to the other of us. "That is the reward, and I have reason to know that there are sentimental considerations in the background which would induce the Countess to part with half her fortune if she could but recover the gem. It was lost, if I remember aright, at the hotel Cosmopolitan, I remarked. "Precisely so. On December 22nd, just 5 days ago. John Horner, a plumber, was accused of having extracted it from the Lady Jewels case. The evidence against it was so strong that the case has been referred to the Azores, and have some account of the matter here, I believe." Ramage amid his newspaper, glancing over the dates, until at last he smoothed one out, doubled it over, and read the following paragraph. "Hotel Constellation, jewel robbery. John Horner, 26, plumber, was brought up upon the charge of having, upon the 22nd, abstracted from the jewel case of the Countess of Mocar the valuable gem known as the blue Carbuncle. James Ryder, upper attendant at the hotel, gave his evidence to the effect that he had shown Horner up to the dressing room of the Countess of Mocar upon the day of the robbery in order that he might solder the second bar of the grate, which was loose. He had remained with Horner some little time, but had finally been called away. On returning, he found that Horner had disappeared, that the bureau had been forced open, and that the small morocco casket in which, as it afterward transpired, the Countess discussed to keep her jewelry, was lying empty upon the dressing table. Ryder instantly gave the alarm, and Horner was arrested the same evening, but the stone could not be found, either upon his person or in his rooms. Catherine Cassatt, maid to the Countess, disposed to having her Ryder's cry of dismay on discovering the robbery, and to having rushed into the room where she found matters as described by the last witness. Inspector Band Street B Division gave evidence as to the arrest of a Horner, who struggled frantically and protested his innocence in the strongest terms. Evidence of a previous conviction for robbery having been given against the prisoner. The magistrate refused to deal summary with the offense, but referred it to the Azirs. Horner, who has shown signs of intense emotions during the proceedings, fainted away at the conclusion and was carried out of court. Damn, he fainted. So much for the police court, said Holmes thoughtfully, tossing aside the paper. The question for us now to solve is the sequence of events leading from the riffled jewel case at one end to the crop of a goose and tattered ham court road at the other. You see, Watson, our little deductions have suddenly assumed a much more important and less innocent aspect. Here is the stone. The stone came from the goose, and the goose came from Mr. Henry Baker, the gentleman with the bad hat, and all the other characteristics which I have bored you. So now we must set ourselves very seriously to finding this gentleman and ascertaining what part he has played in this little mystery. To do this, we must try the simplest means first, and these lie undoubtedly in advertisement in all the evening papers. If this fails, I shall have recourse to other methods. What will you say? Give me a pencil and a slip of paper. Now then, found at the corner of God Street a goose and a black felt hat. Mr. Henry Baker can have the same by applying at 6:30 this evening at 221B Baker Street. This is clear and concise. Very, but will he see it? Well, he is sure to keep an eye on the papers, since to a poor man the loss was a heavy one. He was certainly so scared by his chance in breaking the window and by the approach of Peterson that he thought of nothing but flight. But since then, he must have bitterly regretted the impulse which caused him to drop his bird. Then again, the introduction of his name will cause him to see it, for everyone who knows him will direct his attention to it. Here you are, Peterson. Run down to the advertising agency and have this put in the evening papers. In which, sir? Oh, in the Globe, Star, Pall Mail, St. James, Evening News, Standard, Echo, and any others that occur to you. Very well, sir. In the stone? Ah, yes, I shall keep the stone, thank you. And I say, Peterson, just buy a goose for a new way back, and leave it here with me, for we must have one to give to this gentleman in place of the one which your family is now devouring. When the concierge had gone, Holmes took up the stone and held it against the light. It's a bony thing, said he, to see how it glints and sparkles. Of course it is a nucleus and a focus of crime. Every good stone is. They are the devil's pet baits. And the larger and older jewels, every facet, may stand for a bloody deed. This stone, not yet 20 years old. It was found in the banks of the Ami River in southern China, and is remarkable in having every characteristic of the Carbuncle, save that it is blue in shade instead of ruby red. In spite of its youth, it has already a sinister history. There have been 2 murders, a virtual throwing, a suicide, and several robberies brought about for the sake of this 40 grain weight of crystallized charcoal. Who would think that so pretty a toy would be forward to the gallows and the prison? I'll lock it up in my strong box now and drop a line to the Countess to say that we have it. Do you think that this man, Horner, is innocent? I cannot tell. Well then, do you imagine that this other one, Henry Baker, had anything to do with the matter? It is, I think, much more likely that Henry Baker is an absolutely innocent man who had no idea that the bird which he was carrying was in considerably more value than if it were made of solid gold. That, however, I shall determine by a very simple test if we have an answer to our advertisement. And you can do nothing. Until then, nothing. In that case, I shall continue my professional round, but I shall come back in the evening at the hour you have mentioned, for I should like to see the solution of so tangled a business. Very glad to see you. I dine at 7. There is a woodcock, I believe. By the way, in view of recent occurrences, perhaps I ought to ask Miss Hudson to examine its crop. I had been delayed at a case, and I was a little after 6:30 when I found myself in Baker Street once more. As I approached the house, I saw a tall man in a Scottish bonnet, with a coat which was buttoned up to the chain, waiting outside in bright semicircle which was thrown from the fanlight. Just as I arrived, the door was open, and we were shown up together to Holmes' room. Mr. Henry Baker, I believe, said he, rising from his armchair and greeting his visitor with the easy air of geniality which he could so readily assume. Pray take this chair by the fire, Mr. Baker. It's a cold night, and I observe that your circulation is more adapt for summer than for winter. Ah, Watson, you have just come at the right time. Is that your hat, Mr. Baker? Yes, sir, that is undoubtedly my hat. He was a large man with round shoulders, a massive head, and a broad, intelligent face. Slopping down to a pointed beard of a grizzled brown, a touch of red in nose and cheeks, a slight tremor of his extended hand, recalled Holmes' surmise as to his habits. His rusty black frock coat was buttoned right up in front, with the collar turned up, and his lank wrist protruded from his sleeves, without a sign of cuff or shirt. He spoke in a slow, staccato fashion, choosing his words with care, and gave the impression generally of a man of learning and letters who had ill usage at the hands of fortune. We retained these things for some days, said Holmes, because you expected to see an advertisement from your giving your address. I am at a loss to know why you did not advertise. Our visitor gave a rather shamefaced laugh. Shillings have not been so plentiful with me as they once were, he remarked. I had no doubt that the gang of roughs who assaulted me had carried off both my hat and my bird. I did not care to spend more money in a hopeless attempt at recovering them. And very naturally, by the way, about the bird. We were compelled to eat it. To eat it? Our visitor half rose from his chair in his excitement. Yes, it would have of no use to anyone had we not done so. For I presume that this other goose upon the sideboard, which is about the same weight and perfectly fresh. Will answer your proposed equally well." "Oh, certainly, certainly," answered Mr. Baker with a sigh of relief. "Of course, we still have the feathers, legs, crop, and so on, of your own bird, so if you wish." The rear burst with a hearty laugh. "They may be useful to me as relics of my adventure," said he, "but beyond that, I can hardly see what use." Oh no, it's a French word. I need a Google Translator. Disjected member of my late acquaintance are going to be to me. And now, sir, I think that, with your permission, I will confine my attentions to the excellent input which I received upon the sideboard. Sherlock Holmes glanced sharply across at me, with a slight shrug of his shoulders. "There is your hat, then, and there is your bird," said he. "By the way, would it bore you to tell me where you got the other one from? I am somewhat of a fowl fancier, and I have seldom seen a better grown goose." "Certainly, sir," said Baker, who had risen and tucked his newly gained property under his arm. "There are a few of us who frequent the Alpha Inn near the museum. We are to be found in the museum itself during the day, you understand. This year our good host, Windigate by name, instituted a goose club by which, on consideration of some few pence every week, we were each to receive a bird at Christmas. My pence were duly paid, and the rest is familiar to you. I am much indebted to you, sir, for a Hotch Bandit is fitted neither to my year nor my gravity." With a comical paucity of manner, he bowed solemnly to both of us and started off upon his way. "How much for Mr. Henry Baker?" said Holmes. He had closed the door behind him. "It is quite certain that he knows nothing whatever about the matter. Are you hungry, Watson?" "Not particularly. I suggest that we turn our dinner into a supper, and follow up this clue while it is still hot." "By all means." It was a bitter night, so we drew on our ulsters and wrapped crappets about our throats. Outside, the stars were shining coldly in a cloudless sky, and the breath of the passerby blew out into smoke like so many pistol shots. Our footfall rang out crisply and loudly as we swung through the doctor's quarter, Wimpole Street, Harley Street, and so through Wigmore Street into Oxford Street. In a quarter of an hour, we were in Bloomsbury at the Apple Inn, which is a small public house at the corner of one of the streets which runs down into Holborn. Holmes pushed open the door of the private bar and ordered 2 glasses of beer from the ruby-faced white apron landlord. "Your beer should be excellent if it is as good as your geese," said he. "My geese?" The man seemed surprised. "Yes, I was speaking only half an hour ago to Mr. Henry Baker, who was a member of your goose club." "Ah, yes, I see. But you see, sir, them's not our geese." "Indeed? Whose then?" "Well, I got the 2 dozen from a salesman in Covent Garden. Indeed. I know some of them. Which was it? Breckenridge is his name. I don't know him. Well, here's your good health, landlord. Prosperity to your house. Good night. Now for Mr. Breckenridge, he continued, toning up his coat as we came out into the frosty air. Remember, Watson, that though we have so homely a thing as a goose at one end of this chain, we have at the other a man who will certainly get 7 years penal servitude unless we can establish his innocence. It is possible that our inquiry may but confirm his guilt, but in any case, we have a line of investigation which has been missed by the police, and which a singular chance has placed in our hands. Let us follow it out to the bitter end, faces to the south. Then, a quick march. We passed across Holborn, down Endell Street, and so through a zigzag of slums to Covent Garden Market. One of the largest stalls bore the name Breckenridge upon it, and the proprietor, a horsey-looking man with a sharp face and a trim side whiskers, was helping a boy to put up the shutters. "Good evening. It's a cold night," said Holmes. The salesman nodded and shot a questioning glance at my companion. "Sold out of geese, I see," continued Holmes, pointing at the bare slab of marble. "Yet you have 500 tomorrow morning?" "That's not good. Well, there is some on the stall with the glass flares." But I was recommended to you." "By who?" "The landlord of the Alpha." Yes, I sent him a couple dozen." Fine bird they were, too. Now, where did you get them? To my surprise, the question provoked a burst of anger from the salesman. "Now then, mister," said he, with his head cocked and his arm akimbo, "what are you driving at? Let's have it straight now." "Straight enough. I should like to know who sold you the geese which you supplied to the Alpha." "Well then, I shouldn't tell you so now." It is a matter of no importance, but I doubt you know why you should be so warm over such a trifle." "Warm? You would be as warm maybe if you were as pestered as I am. When I buy good money for a good article, there should be an end of the business. But it's, where are the geese? Who did you sell the geese to? And what will you take for the geese? One would think that they were the only geese in the world, to hear the fuss that is made over them." "Well, I have no connection with any other people who have been making inquiries," said Holmes carelessly. "If you won't tell us, the bet is off. That is all. I'm always ready to back my opinion on the matter of fowls. And I have a fiver on it that the bird I ate is country bred." "Well then, you lost, your fiver, for it's town bred," snapped the salesman. "It's nothing of the kind. I say it is. I don't believe it. Do you think you know more about fowls than I, who have handled them ever since I was a nipper? I tell you, all those birds that went to Alpha were town bred." "You'll never persuade me to believe that." "Will you bet then?" "It's merely taking your money, for I know that I am right. I have a sovereign on with you, just to teach you not to be Sydney. Salesman chuckled grimly. "Bring me the books, Bill," said he. The small boy brought round a small tin volume and a great greasy-backed one, laying them out together beneath the hanging lamp. "Now then, Mr. Cocksure," said the salesman, "I thought that I was out of geese, but before I finish, you'll find that there is still one left in my shop. You see this little book? Well, that's the list of the folk from whom I buy. Do you see? Well then, here on this page are the country folk, and the numbers after their names are where their counts are in the big ledger. Now then, you see this other page is red ink. Well, that is a list of my town supplier. Now, look at the third name. Just read it out to me." Miss Oxshott, 117 Brixton Road, 249, read Holmes. "Quite so. Now I turn that up in the ledger." Holmes turned to the page indicated. "Here you are, Miss Oxshott, 117 Brixton Road, egg and poultry supplier. Now then, what's the last entry? December 22nd, 24 geese at 7s60. Quite so. And there you are, and underneath, sold to Mr. Windigate at the Alpha at, well, that's probably 12 shillings, I think. What do I have to say now? Sherlock Holmes looked deeply chagrined. He drew a shilling from his pocket and threw it down upon the slab, turning away with the air of a man who, disgusted, is too deep for words. A few yards off, he stopped under a lamppost and laughed in a hearty, noiseless fashion which clear to him. "When you see a man with whiskers of that cut and the pink protruding out of his pocket, you could always draw him by a bet," said he. "I dare say that if I had put £100 down in front of him, that man would not have given me such complete information as was drawn from him by the idea that he was doing me a wager. Well, Watson, we are, I fancy, nearing the end of our quest, and the only point which remains to be determined is whether we should go on to this Miss Oxford tonight, or rather we should reserve it for tomorrow. It is clear from what that surly fellow said that there are others besides ourselves who are anxious about the matter, and I should." His remarks were suddenly cut short by a loud hubbub which broke out from the stall which we had just left. Turning round, we saw a little rat-faced fellow standing in the center of a circle of yellow light which was thrown by the swinging lamp, while Breckenridge, the salesman, framed in the door of his stall, was shaking his fist fiercely at the cringy figure. "I've had enough of you and your geese," he shouted. "I wish you all had the devils together. If you come pestering me any more with your silly talk, I'll set the dog at you. You bring Miss Oxford here, and I'll answer her. What have you to do with it? Did I buy the geese off you?" "No, one of them was mine all the same," whined the little man. "Well then, ask Miss Oxford for it. She told me to ask you." "Well, you can ask the King of Prussia for all I care. I had enough of it. Get out of this." He rushed fiercely forward, and the inquirer flitted away into the darkness. "Ha! This may save us a trip to Brixton Road," whispered Holmes. "Come with me, and we will see what it is to be made of this fella." Striding through the scattering knots of people who lounged round the flaring stalls, My companion steadily overtook the little man, touched him upon the shoulder. He sprung round, and I could see in the gaslight that every vestige of color he had been driven from his face. Who are you then? What do you want? He asked in a quivering voice. You will excuse me, said Hold blandly, but I could not help overhearing the questions which you put to the salesman just now. I think that I could be assistance to you. You? Who are you? How could you know anything of the matter? My name is Sherlock Holmes. It is my business to know what others don't know. But you can know nothing of this. Excuse me, I know everything, but you are directed to trace some geese which were sold by Miss Aksha of Brixton Road to a salesman named Breckenridge, by him in turn to Mr. Wintergate of the Alpha, and by him to his club, of which Mr. Henry Becker is a member. Oh, sir, you are the very man whom I have longed to meet, cried the little fellow, with outstretched hands and quivering fingers. I can hardly explain to you how interested I am in this matter. Sherlock Holmes hailed a four-wheeler which was passing. In that case, we had better discuss it in a cozy room rather than in this wind-swept marketplace, he said. Pray tell me, before we go further, who is it that I have the pleasure of assisting? This man hesitated for an instant. My name is John Robinson, he answered, with a sidelong glance. Oh no, the real name, said Holmes sweetly. It is always awkward doing business when an alias. A flush sprung to the white cheeks of the stranger. Well then, said he, my real name is James Ryder. Precisely so. A head attendant of the Hotel Carbuncle. Pray step into the cab, and I shall soon be able to tell you everything which you would wish to know. The little man stood glancing from one to the other of us, with half-frightened, half-hopeful eyes, as one who is not sure whether he is on the verge of a windfall or of a catastrophic. And then he stepped into the cab, and in half an hour we were back in the sitting room of Baker Street. Nothing had been said during our drive, but the high, thin breathing of our new companion, and the clasping and unclasping of his hands, spoke of a nervous tension within him. Here we are, said Holmes cheerily, as we filed into the room. The fire looks very sensible in this weather. You look cold, Mr. Ryder. Pray take the basket chair. I will just put on my slippers before we settle this little matter of yours. Now then, you want to know what become of these geese? Or rather, I fancied that goose. It was one bird, I imagine, in which you were interested. White with a black bar across the tail. Ryder quivered with emotion. Sir, he cried, can you tell me where it went to? It came here. Here. Yes, and a most remarkable bird it proved. It didn't wonder that you would take an interest in it. It laid an egg after it was dead. The bonniest and brightest little blue egg that was ever seen. I have it here in my museum. Our visitor staggered to his feet and clenched the mantelpiece with his right hand. Holmes unlocked his strong lock and held up the blue Carbuncle, which shone out like a star, with a cold, brilliant, manly point of radiance. Ryder stood glaring, with a drawn face, uncertain whether to claim it or disown it. The game is up, Ryder, said Holmes quietly. Hold up, man, or you'll be into the fire. Give him an arm back into his chair, Watson. He's not got blood enough to go in for a felony with impurity. Give him a dash of brandy. So no, he looks a little more human. What a shrimp is it, to be sure. For a moment he had staggered and nearly fallen, but the brandy brought a tinge of color into his cheeks, and he sat staring with frightened eyes at his accuser. I have almost every link in my hands, and all the proof which I could possibly leave, so there is little which you need to tell me. So that little may as well be cleared up to make the case complete. You're a heard writer of this blue stone of the Contrast de Mocars? It was Catherine Cossack who told me of it, said he in a crackling voice. I see. Her ladyship waiting maid. Well, the danger of sudden wealth so easily acquired was too much for you, as it has been for better men before you. But you were never sexless in the means you use. It seems to me, writer, that there is the making of a very pretty villain in you. You knew that this man, Horner the plumber, had been concerned in some such matter before, and that suspicion would rest the more readily upon him. What did you do then? You made some small job in my lady's room, and you and your confederate Cossack, and you managed that he should be the man sent for. Then, when he had left, you rifled the jewel case, raised the alarm, and had that unfortunate man arrested. You then... Ryder threw himself down suddenly upon the rug. Blanche at his companion's sneeze. For God's sake, have mercy, he shrieked. Think of my father, of my mother. It would break their hearts. I never had drawn before. I never will again, I swear it. I'll swear it on a Bible. Oh, don't bring it to court. For Christ's sake, don't. Back into your chair, said Holmes sternly. It is very well to cringe your crown now, but you thought little enough of this poor Horner, and docked for a crime of which he knew nothing. I will fly, Mr. Holmes. I will leave the country, sir. Then the charge against him will break down. We will talk about that. And now let us hear a true account of the next act. How came the stone into the goose, and how came the goose into the open market? Tell us the truth, for there lies your only hope of safety. Ryder passed his tongue over his parched lips. I will tell you, it's just as it happened, sir, said he. When Horner had been arrested, it seemed to me that it would be best for me to get away with the stone at once. For I did not know at what moment the police might not take it into their heads to search me in my room. There was no place about the hotel where it would be safe. I went out as if on some commission. I made for my sister's house. She had married a man named Aksha and lived in Brixton Road, where she fattened fowls for the market. All the way there, every man I met seemed to me to be a policeman or a detective. And for all that, it was a cold night. The sweat was pouring down my face before I came to the Brixton Road. My sister asked me what was the matter and why I was so pale, but I told her that I had been upset by the jewel robbery at the hotel. Then I went into the backyard, smoked a pipe, and wondered what it would be best to do. I had a friend once called Medsley who went to the bad, and has just been serving his time in the Penstaville. One day he had met me and fell into talk about the way of thieves and how they would get rid of what they stole. I knew that he would be true to me, for I knew one or two things about him, I made up my mind to go right on to Kilburn, where he lived, and take him into my confidence. He would show me how to turn stone into money, but how to get to him in safety. I thought of the agonies I had gone through in coming from the hotel. I might at any moment be seized and searched, and there would be the stone in my waistcoat pocket. I was leaning against the wall at the time and looking at the geese, which were waddling about round my feet, and suddenly an idea came into my head, which showed me how I could beat the best detective that ever lived. My sister had told me some weeks before that I might have the pick of her geese for a Christmas present, and I knew that she was always as good as her word. I would take my goose now, and I would carry my stone to Coburn. There was a little shed in my yard, and behind this I drove one of the birds, a fine big one, white and a bar tail. I caught it, and pried its bill open. I thrusted the stone down its throat as far as my finger could reach. The bird gave a gulp, and I felt the stone pass along its gullet and down into its crop. But the creature flapped and struggled, and out came my sister to know what was the matter. As I turned to speak to her, the brood broke loose and flittered off among the others. "Whatever were you doing with that bird, Jem?" says she. "Well," said I, "you said you give me one for Christmas, and I was feeling which was the fattest." "Oh," said she, "we set yours aside for you. Jem's bird, we call it. It's the big white one over yonder. There's 26 of them, which makes one for you and one for us. 2 dozens for the market." "Thank you, Maggie," said I, "but if it's all the same to you, I'd rather have the one I was handling just now." "The other is a good 3 pounds heavier," says she, "and we fatten it expressively for you." "The other is a good, never mind, I'll have the other. And I'll take it now." Oh my god. "Oh, just as you like," said she, a little huff. "Which is the one you want, then?" "That white one with the bar tail, right in the middle of the flock." "Oh, very well. Kill it and take it with you." Well, I did what she said, Mr. Holmes, and I carried the bird all the way to Kilburn. I told my pal what I had done, for he was a man that it was easy to tell a thing like that to. He laughed until he coughed, and we got a knife and opened the goose. My heart turned to water, for there was no sign of the stone, and I knew that some terrible mistake had occurred. I left the bird, rushed back to my sister, hurried into the yard. There was not a bird to be seen. Where are they all, Maggie?" I cried. "Gone to the dealers, Jem." "Which dealers?" Breckenridge, Covent Garden." "But was there another with a bar tail?" I asked, "the same as the one I chose?" "Yes, Jem. There were 2 bar tail ones, and I could never tell them apart." Well then, of course I saw it all, and ran off as hard as my feet could carry to this man, Breckenridge. But he had sold the lot at once, and not one would tell me as to where they had gone. You're hurting yourselves tonight. Well, he has always answered me like that. My sister thinks that I am going mad. Sometimes I think that I am going mad. Sometimes I think I am myself, and now I am myself a branded thief, without ever having touched the wealth for which I sold my character. God help me, God help me, he bursted into convulsing sobbing, with his feet buried in his hands. There was a long silence, broken only by his heavy breathing, and by the measured tapping of Sherlock Holmes fingertips upon the edge of the table. Then my friend rose, threw open the door. "Get out," said he. "Oh, what, sir? Oh, heavens bless you." No more words, get out. And no more words were needed. There was a rush, it clattered upon the stairs, the bang of a door, and this crisp rattle of running footfalls from the street. "After all, Watson," said Holmes, reaching up his hand for his clay pipe. "Why not?" Retained by the police to supply their defiances. Deficiencies. If Horner were in danger, it would be another thing, but this fellow will not appear against him, and the case must collapse. I suppose that I am commuting a felony, but it is just possible that I am saving a soul. This fellow will not go wrong again. He is too terribly frightened. Send him to jail now, and you make him a jailbird for life. Besides, it is the season of forgiveness. The chance has put in our way a more singular and whimsical problem, and its solution and its own reward. If you will have the goodness to touch the bell, Doctor, we will begin another investigation, in which also a bird will be the chef's feature. Okay, and that is the end of that story. Okay, so I don't think I put a marker when I started reading. Well, I thought. Let me put a marker for myself. Where are my commands? Uh-oh, my button's not working. There we go. I pressed the button and it opened a new tab, and then something else popped up. I said, what? What just happened? Is it because there's two buttons right next to each other? I think that's probably what happened. What do I have here? Oh, this is new. Text mode? You delete this and move this one up. You know, that story, but it would have been a good time to read during Christmas. Hopefully this next one's not Christmas related. Okay, so the adventure of the Speckled Band. On glancing over my notes, the 70-old cases in which I have, during the last 8 years, studied the methods of my friend Sherlock Holmes, I find many tragic, some comic, a large number merely strange, but non-commonplace. For working as he did, rather for the love of his art than for the acquirement of wealth, he refused to associate himself with any investigation which did not tend towards the unusual. And even the fantastic of all these varied cases, however, I cannot recall any which presented more singular features than that which was associated with the well-known Sherry family of the Royal Lot of Stoke Moran. The event in question occurred in the early days of my association with Holmes, when we were sharing rooms as bachelors in Baker Street. It is possible that I may have placed them upon record before, but a promise of secrecy was made at the time, from which I have only been freed during the last month by the untimely death of the lady to whom the pledge was given. It is perhaps as well that the fact should now come to light, for I have reasons to know that there was widespread rumors after the death of Dr. Grimsby Roylett, which tends to make the matter even more terrible than the truth. It was early in April, in the year 83, that I awoke one morning to find Sherlock Holmes standing, fully dressed, by the side of my bed. He was a late riser, as a rule, and as the clock on the mantelpiece showed me that it was only 7:15, I blinked up at him in some surprise, and perhaps just a little resentment, for I was myself regular in my habits. Very sorry to knock you up, Watson," said he, "but it's the common lot this morning. Miss Hudson has been knocking up. She retorted upon me, and I on you." "What is it, then? A fire?" "No, a client. It seems that a young lady has arrived in a considerable state of excitement, who insisted upon seeing me. She is waiting now in the sitting room. Now, when young ladies wander about the metropolis at this hour of the morning, and knock sleepy people up out of their beds, I presume that it is something very pressing, which they have to communicate. Should it prove to be an interesting case, you would, I am sure, wish to follow it from the outset. I thought, at any rate, that I should tell you and give you the chance. My dear fellow, I will not miss it for anything. I had no keener pleasure than in following Holmes in his professional investigation, and in admiring the rapid deductions, as swift as intuitions, and yet always founded on the logic basis with which he unraveled the problems which were submitted to him. I rapidly threw on my clothes, and was ready in a few minutes to accompany my friend down to the sitting room. A lady dressed in black and heavily veiled, who had been sitting in the window, rose as we entered. "Good morning, madam," said Holmes cheerily. "My name is Sherlock Holmes. It's my friend and associate, Dr. Watson, before whom you can speak as freely as before myself. I am glad to see that Miss Hudson has had the good sense to light the fire. Pray, draw up to it, and I shall order you a cup of hot coffee, for I observe that you are shivering." "It is not cold which makes me shiver," said the woman in a low voice, changing her seat as requested. "Oh, what then?" "It is fear, Mr. Holmes. It is terror." She raised her veil as she spoke, and we could see that she was indeed in a pitiable state of agitation, her face all drawn and gray, with restless, frightened eyes, like those of some hunted animal. Her features and figure were those of a woman of 30, but her hair was short, with premature gray, and her expression was weary and haggard. Sherlock Holmes ran her over with one of his quick, all-comprehensive glances. "You must not fear," he said soothingly, bending forward and patting her forearm. "We shall soon set matters right, I have no doubt. You have come in by train this morning, I see?" "You know me then?" "No, but I observed the second half of a return ticket in the palm of your left glove. You must have started early, and you had a good drive in a dog cart along heavy roads before you reached the station." The lady gave a violent start and stared in bewilderment at my companion. "There is no mystery, my dear madam," said he, smiling. "The left arm of your jacket is spattered with mud in no less than 7 places. The marks are perfectly fresh. There is no vehicle save a dog cart which throws up mud in that way. And then only when you sit on the left-handed side of the driver." "Whatever your reasons may be, you are perfectly correct," said she. "I started from home before 6, reached Leatherhead at 20 past. It came in by the first train to Waterloo. Sir, I can't stand this staying no longer. I should go mad if it continues. I have no one to turn to, none, save only one who cares for me, and he, poor fellow, can be of little aid. I have heard of you, Mr. Holmes. I have heard of you from Miss Florentine, whom you helped in the hour of her sore need. It was from her that I had your address. Oh, sir, do you not think that you could help me too, and at least throw a little light through the dense darkness which surrounds me? At present, it is out of my power to reward you for your services, but in a month or 6 weeks, I shall be married with the control of my own income, and then at least you shall not find me ungrateful." Holmes turned to his desk and, unlocking it, drew out a small case book, which he consulted. "Florentine," said he. "Ah, yes, I recall the case. It was concerned with a opal tiara. I think it was before your time, Watson. I can only say, madam, that I shall be happy to devote the same care to your case as I did to that of your friend. As to reward, my profession is a dull reward, but you're at liberty to defray whatever expenses I may be put to, at a time which suits you best. And now I beg that you will lay before us everything that may help us in forming an opinion upon the matter." "Alas," replied our visitor, "the very horror of my situation lies in the fact that my fears are so vague and my suspicions depend so entirely upon small points, which might seem trivial to another, that even he to whom, of all others, I have a right to look for help and advice looks upon all that I tell him about it as the antics of a nervous woman." He does not say so, but I can read it from his soothing answers and averted eyes. But I have heard, Mr. Holmes, that you can see deeply into the manifold wickedness of a human's heart. You may advise me how to walk among the dangers which encompass me." "I am all attention, madam. My name is Helen Stoner, and I am living with my stepfather, who is the last survivor of one of the oldest Saxon families in England, and the Roylets of Stoke Moran, on the western border of Surrey." Holmes nodded his head. "The name is familiar to me," said he. "The family was at one time among the richest in England, and the estates extended over the borders into Berkshire in the north, and Hampshire in the west. In the last century, however, 4 successive heirs were of a dissolute and wasteful disposition, and the family ruin was eventually completed by a gambler in the days of the Regency. Nothing was left save a few arcs of ground, in the 200-year-old house, which itself crushed under weight of mortgage. The last squire dragged out his existence there, living the horrible life of an aristocrat pupper, but his only son and my stepfather, seeing that he must adapt himself to the new conditions, obtained an advance from a relative, which enabled him to take a medical degree, and went out to Calcutta, where by his professional skills and his force of character, he established a large practice. In a fit of anger, however, caused by some robberies, which had been perpetrated in the house, he beat his native father to death and narrowly escaped a capital sentence. As it was, he suffered a long term of imprisonment and afterwards returned to England, a morose and disappointed man. When a doctor was in India, he married my mother, Miss Stoner, the young widow of Major General Stoner of the Bengal Artillery. My sister, Julia, and I were twins, and we were only 2 years old at the time of my mother's remarriage. She had a considerable sum of money, not less than £1,000 a year, and this she begged with it to Dr. Roulette entirely, while we resided with him, with a provision that a certain annual sum should be allowed to each of us in the event of our marriage. Shortly after our return to England, my mother died. She was killed 8 years ago in a railway accident near Crewe. Roulette then abandoned his attempts to establish himself in a practice in England and took us to live with him in the old ancestral house at Stoke Moran. The money which my mother had left was enough for all of our wants, and there seemed to be no obstacle to our happiness. But a terrible change came over our stepfather about this time. Instead of making friends and exchanging visits with our neighbors, who had at first been overjoyed to see Roulette of Stoke Moran back in the old family seat, he shut himself up in his old house and soon came out, though to indulge in furious quarrels with whoever might cross his path, violence of temper approaching to mania has been hereditary in the men of the family, and in my stepfather's case it had, I believe, been intensified by his long residence in the tropics. A series of disgraceful rows took place, 2 of which ended in a police court, until at last he became the terror of the village, and the folks would fly at his approach, for he is a man of immense strength and absolutely uncontrollable in his anger. Last week, he hurled the local blacksmith over a parrot into a stream, and it was only by paying over all the money which I could gather together that I was able to avert another public exposure. He had no friends at all, save the wandering gypsies, and he would give those vagabonds leave to encamp upon the few acres on bramble-covered land which represent the family estate. They would accept in return the hospitality of their tents, wandering away with them sometimes for weeks on end. He has a passion also for Indian animals, which are sent over to him by a correspondent, and he has at this moment a cheetah and a baboon, which wander freely over his grounds and are feared by the villagers almost as much as their master. A cheetah for a pet. I thought that was illegal. You can imagine from what I say that my poor sister Julia and I had no great pleasure in our lives. No servant would stay with us, and for a long time we did all the work of the house. She was but 30 at the time of her death, and yet her hair had already begun to whiten, even as mine has. Your sister is dead, then? Yes, died just 2 years ago. It is of her death that I wish to speak to you. You can understand that living the life which I have described, we were little likely to see anyone of our own age and position. We had, however, an aunt, my mother's maiden sister, Miss Honora Westville, who lives near Harrow, and we were occasionally allowed to pay short visits at this lady's house. Julia went there at Christmas 2 years ago and met there a half-pay major of Marines to whom she became engaged. My stepfather learned of the engagement, and when my sister returned and offered no objection to the marriage, but within a fortnight of the day which had been fixed for the wedding, the terrible event occurred, which had deprived me of my only companion. Sherlock Holmes had been leaning back in his chair with his eyes closed and his head sucked in a cushion, but he half opened his lids now and glanced across at his visitor. "Maybe besides as to the details," said he. "It is easy for me to be so, for every event of that dreadful time is shared into my mind. The manor house is, as I have already said, very old, and only one wing is now inhabited. The bedrooms in the wings are on the ground floor, the sitting rooms being in the central block of the buildings. One of these bedrooms, the first is Dr. Roylette's, the second my sister's, and the third my own. There is no communication between them, but they all open out into the same corridor. Do I make myself plain?" "Perfectly so. The windows of the 3 rooms open out upon the lawn. That fatal night, Dr. Roylette had gone to his room early, though we knew that he had not retired to rest, for my sister was troubled by the smell of the strong Indian cigars, which was his custom to smoke. She left her room, therefore, and came into mine, where she sat for some time, chatting about her approaching wedding. At 11 o'clock she rose to leave me, but she paused at the door and looked back. "Tell me, Helen," said she, "have you ever heard anyone whistle in the dead of night?" "Never," said I. "I suppose that you could not possibly whistle yourself in your sleep?" "Certainly not, but why?" "Because during the last few months I have always about 3 in the morning heard a low, clear whistle. I am a light sleeper, and it has awakened me. I cannot tell where it came from. Perhaps from the next room? Perhaps from the lawn? I thought that I would just ask you rather you had heard it." "No, I have not. It must be those wretched gypsies in the plantation. Very likely. And yet, if it were on the lawn, I wonder that you did not hear it also." But I sleep more heavily than you do." "Well, it is of no great consequence at any rate." She smiled back at me, closed my door, and a few moments later I heard her key turn in the lock. "Indeed," said Holmes. "Was it your custom always to lock yourselves in at night?" "Always." "And why?" "I think that I mentioned to you that the doctor kept a cheetah and a baboon. We had no feelings of security unless our doors were locked." "Quite so. Pray proceed with your statement." "I could not sleep that night. A vague feeling of impending misfortune impressed me. My sister and I, you will recollect, were twins, and you know how subtle are the links which bind 2 souls, which are so clearly allied. It was a wild night. The wind was howling outside, and the rain was beating and splashing against the windows. Suddenly, amid all the hubbub of the gales, there burst forth the wild scream of a terrified woman. I knew that it was my sister's voice. I sprung from my bed, wrapped a shawl around me, and rushed in the corridor. As I opened my door, I seemed to hear a low whistle, such as my Swiss sister described, and a few moments later, a clanging sound as if a mass of metal had fallen. As I ran down the passage, my sister's door was unlocked and revolving slowly upon its hinges. I stared at it in horror-stricken, not knowing what was about to issue from it. By the light of the corner lamp, I saw my sister appear at the opening, her face blanched with terror. Her hands were groping for help, her whole figure swaying to and fro like that of a drunkard. I ran to her and threw my arms around her, but at that moment her knees seemed to give way and she fell to the ground. She withered as one who is in a terrible pain, and her limbs were dreadfully repulsive. At first I thought that she had not recognized me, but as I bent over her, she suddenly shrieked out in a voice which I shall never forget. My God, Helen! It was the band, the sparkling band. There was something else which she would fain have said, and she stabbed with her fingers into the air in the direction of the doctor's room. But a fresh convulsing seized her and choked her words. I rushed out, calling loudly for my stepfather, and I met him hastening from his room in his dressing gown. When he reached my sister's side, she was unconscious, and though he poured brandy down her throat and sent for medical aid from the village, all efforts were in vain, for she slowly sank and died without having recovered her consciousness. This was the dreadful end of my beloved sister. Oh, that's so sad. One moment, said Holmes. Are you sure about this whistle and metallic sound? Could you swear to it? That was what the country coroner asked me at the Inquirer. It is my strong impression that I heard it, and yet among the crash of the gale and the creaking of an old house, I am possibly have been deceived. Was your sister dressed? No, she was in her nightgown, a nightdress. In her right hand was found the charred stump of a match, and in her left, a matchbox. Showing that she had struck a light and looked about her when the alarm took place. This is important. And what conclusions did the coroner come to? He investigated the case with great care, for Dr. Roulette's conduct had long been notorious in the country. He was unable to find any satisfactory cause of death. My evidence showed that the door had been fastened upon the inner side, and the windows were blocked by old-fashioned shutters with broad iron bars, which were secured every night. The walls were carefully sounded and were shown to be quite solid all round, and the flooring was also thoroughly examined. Was the same result. The chimney is wide, but is barred up by 4 large staples. It is certain, therefore, that my sister was quite alone when she met her end. Besides, there was no marks of any violence upon her. How about poison? The doctors examined her for it, but without success. What do you think that this unfortunate lady died of, then? It is my belief that she died of pure fright and nervous shock, though what it was that frightened her, I cannot imagine. Were there gypsies in the plantation at the time? Yes, there were nearly always some there. And what did you gather from this allusion to a band, a Speckled Band? Sometimes I have thought that it was merely a wild talk of delirium. Sometimes that it may have referred to some band of people, perhaps to these very gypsies in the plantation. I do not know, rather the spotted handkerchiefs, which so many of them wore over their heads, might have suggested the strange adjective which she used. Holmes shook his head like a man who was far from being satisfied. These are very deep waters, said he. Pray go on with the narrative. 2 years has passed since then, and my life has been until lately lonelier than ever. A month ago, however, a dear friend whom I have known for many years has done me the honor to ask my hand in marriage. His name is Armiraj, Percy Armiraj, the second son of the Mr. Armiraj of Crane Water near Reading. My stepfather had offered no opposition to the match, and we are to be married in the course of the spring. 2 days ago, some repairs were started in the west wing of the building. In my bedroom wall has been pierced, so that I have had to move into the chamber in which my sister died, and to sleep in the very bed in which she slept. Imagine then my thorough terror when last night, as I woke, thinking over her terrible fate, I suddenly heard in the silence of the night the low whistle, which had been the horror of her own death. I sprung up and lit the lamp, but nothing was to be seen in the room. I was too shaken to go to bed again. However, so I dressed, and as soon as it was daylight, I slipped down, got a dog car at the Crown Inn, which is opposite, and drove to Leatherhead, from whence I have come on this morning with the one object of seeing you and asking your advice. You have done wisely, said my friend. But have you told me all? Yes, all. Miss Paulette, you have not. You were screening your stepfather. Why? What do you mean? For answer, Holmes pushed back to frill of black lace, which fringed the hand that lay upon our visitor's knee. 5 little vivid spots, the marks of 4 fingers and a thumb, were painted upon the white wrist. You have been cruelly used, said Holmes. The lady colored deeply and covered her injured wrist. He is a hard man, said she, and perhaps he hardly knows his own strength. There was a long silence, during which Holmes leaned his chin upon his hand and stared into the crackling fire. This is a very deep business, he said at last. There are 1,000 things which I should desire to know before I decide upon our course of action. Yet we have not a moment to lose. If we were to come to Stoke Moran today, would it be possible for us to see over the rooms without the knowledge of your stepfather? As it happens, he spoke of coming into town today upon some most important business. It is probable that he will be away all day, and that there will be nothing to disturb you. We have a housekeeper now, but she is old and foolish, and I could easily get her out of the way. Excellent. You're not adverse to this trip, Watson? By no means. Then we shall both come. Or are you going to do yourself? I have 1 or 2 things which I would wish to do now that I am in town, but I shall return by 12 o'clock train, so as to be there in time for your coming. And you may expect us early in the afternoon. I have myself some small business matters to attend to. Will you not wait in breakfast? Oh, I must go. My heart is lightened already, since I had confided my troubles to you. I should look forward to seeing you again this afternoon. She dropped her thick black veil over her face and glided from the room. And what do you think of all of it? Of it all, Watson? Asked Sherlock Holmes, leaning back in his chair. It seems to me to be a most dark and sinister business. Dark enough and sinister enough. Yet, if the lady is correct in saying that the flooring and walls are sound, and that the door, window, and chimney are impassable, then her sister must have been undoubtedly alone when she met her mysterious end. What becomes then of those nocturnal whistles, and what of the very particular words of the dying woman? I cannot think. When you clone the ideas of whistles at the night, the presence of abandoned gypsies, who are on intimate terms with this old doctor, and the fact that we have every reason to believe that the doctor has an interest in preventing his stepdaughter's marriage, the dying allusion to a band, and finally the fact that Miss Helen Stoner heard a metallic clang, which might have been caused by one of these metal bars that secured the shutter falling back into place. I think that there is good ground to think that the mystery may be cleared along those lines. But what then did the gypsies do? I cannot imagine. I see many objections to any such theory. And so do I. It is precisely for the reason that we are going to Stoke Moran this day. I want to see whether the objections are fatal or if they may be explained away. But what is the name of the devil? The ejaculation had been drawn from my companion by the fact that our door had been suddenly dashed open and that a huge man had framed himself into departure. His costume was a particular mixture of the professional and of the agricultural, having a black top hat, a long frock coat, and a pair of high gaiters, with a hunting crop swinging in his hand. So tall was he that his hat actually pressed the crossbar of the doorway, and his Oh, Julio, hi! I just remembered I have it on Twitch and not on YouTube. And I lost my place. Now we're talking about this man. So tall was he that his hat actually brushed the crossbar of the doorway, and his vest seemed to span it across from side to side. A large face smeared with 1,000 wrinkles, burned yellow with the sun and marked with every evil passion, was turned from one to the other of us, while his deep-set bloodshot eyes and his high, thin, fleshless nose gave him somewhat the resemblance to a fierce old bird of prey. "Which of you is Holmes?" asked this apparition. "My name, sir, but you have the advantage of me," said my companion quietly. "I am Dr. Grimsby Roylett of Stoke Moran." "Indeed, doctor," said Holmes blandly. "Pray take a seat." "I will do nothing of the kind. My stepdaughter has been here. I have traced her. What has she been saying to you?" "It is a little cold for the time of year," said Holmes. "What has she been saying to you?" screamed the old man furiously. "But I've heard that the Chris promised well," continued my companion, and tributally. "Ha, you put me off, do you?" said our new visitor, taking a step forward and shaking his hunting crop. "I know you, you scoundrel. I have heard of you before. You are Holmes the meddler." My friend smiled. "Holmes the busybody." His smile broadened. "Holmes the Scotland Yard Jack in office." Holmes chuckled heartily. "Your conversation is most entertaining," said he. "When you go out, close the door, for there is a decided drought." "I will go when I have my say. Don't you dare to meddle with my affairs. I know that Miss Stoner has been here. I traced her. I am a dangerous man to fall foul of. See here." He stepped swiftly forward, seized the poker, and bent it in a curve with his huge brown hands. "See that you keep yourself out of my grasp," he snarled, and hurling twisted pork into the fireplace, he strode out of the room. "Damn. He's a very admirable person," said Holmes, laughing. "I am not quite so Buckley, but if he had remained, I might have shown him that my grip was not much more feeble than his own." As he spoke, he picked up the sheer poke and, with a sudden effort, straightened it out again. see he's having the SOS confound me with the official detective force. This incident gives zest to our investigation. However, I only trust our little friend will not suffer for her imprudence in allowing this brute to trace her. And now, Watson, we shall order breakfast, and afterwards I shall walk down to Dr. Commons, where I hope to get some data which may help us in this matter. It was nearly 1 o'clock when Sherlock Holmes returned from his excursions. He held in his hand a sheet of blue paper, scrawled over with notes and figures. I have seen the will of the deceased wife, said he, to determine its exact meaning. I have been obligated to work out the present price of the investment which it is concerned. The total income, which at the time of the wife's death was a little short of £1,100, is now, though the fall in agriculture prices, not more than £750. Each daughter can claim an income of £250 in case of marriage. It is evident, therefore, that if both girls had married, this beauty would have had a matins, while even one of them would cripple him to a very serious extent. My morning's work has not been wasted, since it is proved that he has the very strongest motives for standing in the way of anything of the sort. And now, Watson, this is too serious for blundering, especially as the old man is aware that we are interesting ourselves in his affairs. So, if you are ready, we shall call a cab and drive to Waterloo. I should be very much obligated if you would slip your revolver into your pocket. Oh. And line number 2 is an excellent argument for argument with a gentleman who can twist steel pokers into knots. That and a toothbrush are, I think, all that we need. At Waterloo, we were fortunate in catching a train for the Leatherhead, where we hired a trap at the station inn and drove for 4 or 5 miles through the lovely showy lanes. It was a perfect day with a bright sun and a few flinty clouds in the heavens. The trees and the wayside hedges were just throwing out the first green shoots, and the air was full of the pleasant smell of the moist earth. To me, at least, there was a strange contrast between the sweet promise of the spring and the sinister quest upon which we were engaged. My companion sat in the front of the trap, his arms folded, his hat pulled down over his eyes, and his chin sunk upon his breast, buried in the deepest thought. Suddenly, however, he started tapping me on the shoulder and pointed over the meadows. "Look there," said he. A heavily timbered park stretched up in a gentle slope, thickening into the grove at the highest point. From amid the branches there jutted out the gray gabs of high-roofed trees of a very old mansion. "Duke Marin," said he. "Yes, sir. That to be the house of Dr. Grimsby Riley," remarked the driver. "There is some buildings going on there," said Holmes. "That is where we are going?" "There's the village," said the driver, pointing to a cluster of roofs some distance to the left. "But if you want to get to that house, you'll find it shorter to get over this stile and so by footpath over the fields. There it is, where the lady is walking." "And the lady, I fancy, is Miss Stoner," observed Holmes, shading his eyes. "Yes, I think we had better do as you suggest." We got off, paid our fare, and the trap rattled back on its way to Leatherhead. "I thought it as well," said Holmes, as we climbed the scythe, "that this fellow should think we had come here as a architects or on some definite business. It may stop some gossip. Good afternoon, Miss Stoner. They said that we have been as good as our word. Our client of the morning had hurried forward to meet us with a face which spoke her joy. I have been waiting so eagerly for you, she cried, shaking hands with us warmly. It has turned out splendidly. Dr. Willett has gone to town, and it is so unlikely that he will be back before evening. We have had the pleasure of making the doctor's acquaintance, said Holmes. In a few words, he sketched out what had occurred. Miss Dorner turned white to the lips as she listened. Good heavens! He has followed me then? So it appears. He is so cunning that I never knew when I am safe from him. What will he say when he returns? He must guard himself, for he may find that there is someone more cunning than himself upon his track. You must lock yourself up from him tonight. If he is violent, he shall take you away to your aunt at Harrow. Now, we must make the best use of our time, so kindly take us at once to the rooms which we are to examine. The building was of gray linnet-blotched stone, with a high central position and two curving wings, like the claws of a crab, thrown out on each side. And one of these wings, the windows were broken and blocked with wooden boards, while the roof was partly caved in. A picture of ruin. The central portion was in little better repair, but the right-hand block was comparatively modern, and the blinds in the windows, with the blue smoke curling up from the chimney, showed that this was where the family resided. Some scaffolding had been erected against the end wall, and the stonework had been broken into, but there were no signs of any workmen at the moment of our visit. Holmes walked slowly up and down the ill-trimmed lawn and examined with deep attention the outsides of the window. This, I take it, belongs to the room in which you used to sleep? The center one to your sisters? And the one next to the main building, to Mr. Burlett's chamber. Exactly so. But I am now sleeping in the middle one. Pending the alterations, as I understand. By the way, there does not seem to be any very pressing need for repairs at that end wall. There were none. I believe that it was an excuse to move me from my room. That is suggestive. Now, on the other side of this narrow wing runs the corridor from which these three rooms open. There are windows in it, of course. Yes, but very small ones, too narrow for anyone to pass through. As you both locked your doors at night, your rooms were unapproachable from this side. Now, would you have the kindness to go into your room and bar your shutters? Miss Dorner did so, and Holmes, after careful examination through the open window, endeavored in every way to force the shutters open, but without success. There was a slit through which a knife could be passed to raise the bars. Then, with his lens, he tested the hinges, but they were of solid iron, built firmly into the massive masonry. Said he, scratching his chin in some perplexity. My theory certainly presents some difficulties. No one could pass these shutters if they were bolted. Well, we shall see if the inside throws any light upon the matter. A small side door led into the whitewashed corridor from which the three bedrooms opened. Holmes refused to examine the third chamber, so he passed at once to the second, that in which Miss Turner was now sleeping, and in which her sister had met her fate. It was a homely little room, with a low ceiling and a gaping fireplace, after the fashion of old country houses. A brown chest of drawers stood in one corner, a narrow, white counterpane bed in another. and a dressing table on the left-hand side of the window. These articles, with two small wickerwork chairs, made up all the furniture in the room, save for a square of wilted carpet in the center. The boards round and the paneling of the walls were of brown, worm-eaten oak, so old and discolored that it may have dated from the original building of the house. Holmes drew one of the chairs into the corner and sat silent, but his eyes traveled round and round and up and down, taking in every detail of the apartment. "Where does the bell communicate with?" he asked, at last pointing to a thick bell rope which hung down beside the bed, the tassel actually laying upon the pillow. "It goes to the housekeeper's room." "It looks newer than the other things." Yes, it was only put there a couple years ago." "Your sister Axford, I suppose?" "No, I never heard of her using it. We used always to get what we wanted for ourselves." Instead, it seemed unnecessarily to put so nicely a bell pull there. "You will excuse me for a few moments while I satisfy myself as to this floor." He threw himself down upon his face with his lens in his hand and crawling swiftly backwards and forward, examining minutely the cracks between the boards. Then he did the same with the woodwork, with which the chamber was paneled. Finally, he walked over to the bed and spent some time in staring at it, and in running his eyes up and down the wall. Finally, he took the bell rope in his hand and gave it a brisk tug. "Why, it's a dummy," said he. "When it rang?" "No. It's not even attached to a wire. This is very interesting. You can see now that it is fastened to a hook just above where the little opening for the ventilator is." "How very absurd. Never noticed that before." "Very strange," muttered Holmes, pulling at the rope. "There are one or two very particular points about this room. For example, what a fool a builder must be to open a ventilator into another room. Then, with the same trouble, he might have communicated with the outside air." That is also quite modern, said the lady. "Done about the same thing as the bell rope?" remarked Holmes. "Yeah, there were several little changes carried out about that time. They seem to have been of an almost interesting character. Dummy bell rope and ventilators, which do not ventilate. With your permission, sir, I shall now carry our visitors into the inner apartment." Dr. Grimsby Butler's chamber was larger than that of his stepdaughter, but was as plainly furnished. A camp bed, a small wooden shelf full of books, mostly of technical characters, an armchair besides the bed, a plain wooden chair against the wall, a round table, and a large iron safe with the principal things which met the eye. Holmes walked slowly around and examined each and every one of them with the keenest interest. "What's in here?" he asked, tapping the safe. "My stepfather's business papers." "Oh, you have seen inside then?" "Only once, some years ago. I remember that it was full of papers." "There isn't a cat in there, for example?" "Oh, what a strange idea." Well, look at this." He took up a small saucer of milk which stood on the top of it. "No, we don't keep a cat, but there is a cheetah and a baboon." "Ah, yes, of course. Well, a cheetah is just a big cat, and yet a saucer of milk does not go very far in satisfying its wants, I dare say. There is one point which I would wish to determine." He squinted down in front of the wooden chair and examined the seat of it with the greatest attention. "Thank you. It is quite settled," he said, rising and putting his lens in his pocket. "Hello. Here is something interesting." The object which had caught his eye was a small dog flash hung on one of the corners of the bed. The lash, however, was curled upon itself and tied so as to make a loop of a whipcord. What do you make of that, Watson? It's a common enough lash, but I don't know why it would be tied. That is not quite so common, is it? I mean, it's a wicked world. When a clever man turns his brain to crime, it is the worst of all. I think that I have seen enough now, Miss Stoner, and with your permission, we shall walk out upon the lawn. I never seen my friend's face so grim, or his brow so dark, as it was when he turned from the scene of his investigations. We had walked several times up and down the lawn, neither Miss Stoner nor myself liking to break in upon his thoughts before he roused himself from his reverie. It is very essential, Miss Stoner, said he, that you should absolutely follow my advice in every respect. I shall most certainly do so. The matter is too serious for any hesitation. Your life may depend upon your compliance. I assure you that I am in your hands. In the first place, both my friend and I must spend the night in your room. Both Miss Stoner and I gazed at him in astonishment. Yes, it must be so. Let me explain. I believe that is the village inn over there? Yes, that is the Crown. Very good. Your window should be visible from there. Certainly. You must confine yourself in your room on pretense of a headache when your stepfather comes back. Then when you hear him retire for the night, you must open the shutters of your windows, undo the hasp, put your lamp there as a signal to us, and then withdraw quietly with everything which you are likely to want into the room which you used to occupy. I know that in spite of the repairs, you can manage there for one night? Yes, easily. The rest you will leave in our hands. But what will you do? We shall spend the night in your room, and we shall investigate the cause of this noise which has disturbed you. I believe, Mr. Holmes, that you have already made up your mind. Said Miss Stoner, laying her hand upon my companion's sleeve. Perhaps I have. Then, for pity's sake, tell me what was the cause of my sister's death. I should prefer to have clearer proofs before I speak. You can at least tell me whether my own thought is correct, and if she died from some sudden fright. No, I do not think so. I think there was probably some more tangible cause, and now, Miss Stoner, we must leave you, for if Mr. Rutley returned and saw us, our journey would be in vain. And goodbye and be brave, for if you will do what I have told you, you may rest assured that we shall soon drive away the dangers that threaten you. Sherlock Holmes and I had no difficulty in engaging a room and sitting room at the Crown Inn. They were on the upper floor, and from our window we could command a view of the avenue gate and of the inhabited wing of Stoke Moran, Moran House. Oh, sorry, Stoke Moran, a manor house. Damn. At dusk, we saw Mr. Ginsbury Roylett driving past, his huge form looming up beside the little figure of the lad who drove him. The boy had some slight difficulty in undoing the heavy iron gate, and we heard the hoarse roar of the doctor's voice, saw the fury with which he shook his clenched fist at him. The trap drove on, and a few minutes later, we saw the sudden light sprung up among the trees as the lamp was lit in one of the sitting rooms. Do you know, Watson, said Holmes, as we sat together in the gathering darkness, I have really some scriptures as to taking you tonight. There is a distant element of danger. Can I be of assistance? Your presence might be inevitable. Then I shall certainly come. It is very kind of you. You speak of danger. You have really seen more in these rooms than was visible to me. No, but I fancy that I may have deducted a little more. I imagine that you saw all that I did. I saw nothing remarkable save the bell rope, and what purpose that could answer, I confess, is more than I can imagine. You saw the ventilator too? Yes, but I do not think that it was such a very unusual thing to have a small opening between two rooms. It was so small that a rat could possibly pass through. I knew that we would find a ventilator before ever we came to Moran. My dear Holmes. Yes, I did. You remember in her statement she said that her sister could smell Dr. Verlet's cigar? Now, of course, that suggests at once that there must be a communication between the two rooms. It could also be a small one, or it would have been remarked upon at the coroner's inquiry. I deducted a ventilator. But what harm can there be in that? Well, there is at least a curious coincidence of dates. A ventilator is made, a cord is hung. A lady who sleeps in the bed dies. Does not that strike you? I cannot as yet see any connection. Did you observe anything else very peculiar about that bed? No. It was clamped to the floor. Did you ever see a bed fastened like that before? I cannot say that I have. The lady could not move her bed. It must always be in the same relative position to the ventilator and to the rope. Or so we may call it, since it was clearly never meant for a bell pull. Holmes, I cried. I seem to see dimly what you are hinting at. We are only just in time to prevent some subtle and horrible crime. Subtle enough and horrible enough. When a doctor does go wrong, he is the first of criminals. He has nerve, and he has acknowledged. Homer and Pritchard were among the heads of their profession. This man strikes even deeper, but I think, Watson, that we shall be able to strike deeper still. We shall have horrors enough before the night is over. For goodness sake, let us have a quiet pipe and turn our minds for a few hours to something more cheerful. About 9 o'clock, the light among the trees was extinguished, and all was dark in the direction of the manor house. 2 hours passed slowly away, and then suddenly, just at the stroke of 11, a single bright light shone out right in front of us. As a signal, said Holmes, springing to his feet. It comes from the middle window. As we passed out, he exchanged a few words with the landlord, explained that they were going on a late visit to acquaintance, that it was possible that we might spend the night there. A moment later, we were out on the dark road, a chilled wind blowing in our faces, and one yellow light twinkling in front of us through the gloom to guide us on our somber errand. There was little difficulty in entering the grounds, for unrepaired breaches gapped in the old park wall. Making our way among the trees, we reached a long crossing and were about to enter through the window when out from a clump of lynch bushes there darted who seemed to be Randy's distorted child, who threw itself upon the grass with little limbs, and they ran swiftly across lawn into the darkness. My God, I whispered, did you see it? Holmes was for the moment as startled as I. His hand clasped like a vice upon my wrist in his agitation. Then he broke into a low laugh and put his lips to his ear. It is a nice household, he murmured. That is a baboon. I had forgotten the strange pets which the doctor affected. There was a cheetah too, perhaps. We might find it upon our shoulders at any moment. I confess that I felt easier in my mind when, after following Holmes' example, I slipped off my shoes. I found myself inside the bedroom. My companion noiselessly closed the shutters, removed the lamp onto the table. He cast his eyes around the room. all was as we had seen it in the daytime. Then, creeping up to me and making tramp of his hand, he whispered into my ear again, so gently, that it was all that I could do to distinguish the words. The least sound will be fatal to our plans. I nodded to show that I had heard. We must sit without light. He would see it through the ventilator. I nodded again. Do not go to sleep. Your very life may depend upon it. Have your pistol ready in case we should need it. I will sit on the side of the bed, and you in that chair. I took out my revolver and laid it on the corner of the table. Holmes, I brought up a long, thin cane, and this he placed upon the bed beside him. By it, he laid the box of matches, a stump of a candle. Then he turned down the lamp, and we were left in darkness. How shall I ever forget that dreadful, vigil? I could not hear a sound, not even the drawing of a breath, and yet I knew that my companion sat open-eyed, within a few feet of me, in the same state of nervous tension at which I was myself. The shutters cut off the least ray of light, and we waited in absolute darkness. From outside came the occasional cry of a night bird, and once, at our very window, a long-drawn cat-like whine, which told us that the cheetah was indeed at liberty. Far away, we could hear the deep tone of the parish clock, which boomed out every quarter of an hour. How long they seemed, those quarters. 12 struck. 12 struck, and 1 and 2 and 3, and still we sat waiting silently for whatever might befall. Suddenly, there was the momentarily gleam of a light up in the direction of the ventilator, which vanished immediately, but was succeeded by a strong smell of burning oil and heated metal. Someone in the next room had lit a dark lantern. I heard a gentle sound of movement, and then all was silent. Once more, though, the smell grew stronger. For half an hour, I sat with straining eyes. Then suddenly, another sound became audible. A very gentle, soothing sound, like that of a small jet of steam escaping continuously from a kettle. The instant that we heard it, Holmes sprung from the bed, struck a match, and lashed furiously with his cane at the bell pull. You see it, Watson? You see it? Oh, hold on. You see it, Watson? He yelled. You see it? But I saw nothing. At the moment when Holmes struck the light, I heard a low, clear whistle, but the sudden glare flashing in my watery eyes made it impossible for me to tell what it was. At which my friend lashed so savagely. I could, however, see that his face was deadly pale and filled with horror and loathing. He had ceased to strike. It was gazing up at the ventilator, and suddenly there broke from the silence of the night the most horrible cry to which I have ever listened. It swelled up louder and louder, a hoarse yell of pain and fear and anger all mingled in one dreadful shriek. They say that away down in the village and even in the distant parsonage, the cry raised the sleepers from their beds. It struck cold to our hearts, and I stood gazing at Holmes and he at me until the last echo of it had died away into the silence, from which it rose. What can it mean? I gasped. It means that it's all over, Holmes answered, and perhaps, after all, it is for the best. Take your pistol and we will enter Mr. Doyle's room. With a grave face, he lit the lamp and led the way down the corridor. Twice he struck at the chamber door without any reply from within. Then he turned the handle and entered. I at his heel, with a cocked pistol in my hand. It was a singular sight which met our eyes. On the table stood a dark lantern, with it shuttered half open, throwing a brilliant beam of light upon an iron safe, door of which was ajar. Beside this table, on the wooden chair, sat Dr. Grimsby Roylott, clad in a long gray dress gown. His bare ankles protruded beneath, and his feet thrusted into red, heelless Turkish slippers. Across his lap lay the short stalk with a long last, which we had noticed during the day. His chin was cocked upward, and his eyes were fixed in a dreadful, wicked stare at the corner of the ceiling. Round his brow he had a particular yellow band, with brownish sparkles, which seemed to bond tightly around his head. As we entered, he made neither sound nor motion. The Speckled Band, whispered Holmes. Took a step forward in an instant. His strange headgear began to move, and there, rearing itself from among his hair, the squint diamond-shaped head and puffed neck of a loathsome serpent. Oh! So, it was was it poison then? I took a step forward, and in an instant the strange headgear it began to move, and there reared itself from among his hair the squint diamond-shaped head and puffed neck of a loathsome serpent. It is a swamp adder, cried Holmes, the deadliest snake in India. He had died within 10 seconds of being bitten. Violence does, in truth, recoil upon the violent, and this schemer falls into the pit which he digs for another. Let us trust this creature back into his den, and we can then remove this stoner to some place of shelter and let the country police know what has happened. As he spoke, he drew the dog whistle swiftly from the dead man's lap and threw the nose round the reptile's neck. He drew it from its horrid perch and carried it at arm's length through it into the iron safe which he closed upon it. Such are the true facts of the death of Dr. Grimsby Roylott of Stoke Moran. It is not necessarily that I should prolong a narrative which has already run to too great a length by telling how we broke the sad news to the terrified girl, how we conveyed her by the morning train to the care of her good aunt at Harrow, of how the slow process of official inquiry came to the conclusion that the doctor met his fate while indiscreetly playing with a dangerous pet. The little which I had yet to learn of the case was told me by Sherlock Holmes as we traveled back next day. I had, said he, come to an entirely erroneous conclusion, which shows, my dear Watson, how dangerous it always is to reason from insufficient data. The presence of gypsies and the use of the word band, which was used by the poor girl, no doubt to explain the appearance, which she had caught a horrid glimpse of by the light of her match, was sufficient to put me upon an entirely wrong scent. I could only claim the merit that I instantly reconsidered my position, when, however, it became clear to me that whatever danger threatened the occupant of the room could not come either from the window or the door. My attention was speedily drawn, as I have already remarked to you, to the ventilator, and to the bell rope which hung down to the bed. The discovery that it was a dummy, and that the bed was clamped to the floor, instantly gave reason to suspicion that the rope was there as a bridge for something passing through the hole and coming to the bed. The idea of this thing instantly occurred to me, and when I coupled it with my knowledge that the doctor was furnished with a supply of creatures from India, I thought that I was probably on the right track. The idea of using a form of poison which could not possibly be discovered by any chemical test was such a one as would occur to a clever and ruthless to a clever and ruthless man who had Eastern training. The rapidly with which such a poison would take effect would also, from his point of view, be an advantage. It would be a sharp-eyed coroner indeed, who could distinguish the two little dark punctures, which would show where the poison fang had done the work. When I thought of the whistle, of course, he must recall the snake before the morning light revealed it to the victim. He had trained it, probably by the use of the milk, which we saw, to return to him when summoned. He would put it through his ventilator at the hour that he thought best, was certainly that it would crawl down the rope and land on the bed. It might or might not bite the occupant. Perhaps she might escape every night for a week, or sooner or later she might fall a victim. I had come to these conclusions before ever I entered his room. An inspection of his chair showed me that he had been in the habit of standing on it, which of course would be necessary in order that he should reach the ventilator. The sight of the safe, the saucer of milk, the loop of the whipcord were enough to finally dispel any doubts which may have remained. The metallic clang heard by Miss Doyle was also caused by her stepfather hastily closing the door of his safe upon its terrible occupant. Having once made up my mind, you know the steps which I took in order to put the matter to the proof. I heard the creature hiss, thus I have no doubt that you did also, and I instantly lit the light and attacked it, with the result of driving it through the ventilator, and also with the result of causing it to turn upon its master at the other side. Some of the blows of my cane came home and roused its snakish temper, so that it flew upon the first person it saw. In this way, I am no doubt indirectly responsible for Dr. Ginsby Roulette's death, and I cannot say that it is likely to weigh very heavily upon my conscience. Damn, so that means the father was actually trying to kill the daughter, probably for the money. Jesus Christ. Let's see here. So that was about 2.5 hours. I might just stop with these 2 stories. We are going to be live again at 5, but we're going to be playing Digimon. And I'm probably going to go for early lunch anyway. So yeah. Let me just see who is on so we can rate them. And then I'll see everyone at 5. Is there anyone that I haven't rated before is the question. Okay, so it looks like Cheshire Poe is doing some co-working. He is working on a project, so we could probably, I haven't rated him in a while, so I guess we can rate him. Let me unmute him just in case he's gonna raid out anytime soon. Alright, cool. It went through fine. Okay, cool. So thank everyone who came to the reading stream. As I said, we will be live again later in a couple hours. We're gonna be playing Digimon Survive, and then maybe if we have time, we're gonna be doing some Digimon doodlings. So yeah, that will be fun. I am totally not prepared. I'm totally not prepared for anyone else dying in Digimon Survive. I'm just saying. So, I will see everyone then. Bye.
左ポケットで眠る昨日をそっと黙らせて靴ひもを締めた転ぶたびにできた謎の印も地図の端っこで呼吸してる似たような朝が続くようでいて少しだけ違う光の気配止まった時計もそれなりの顔で今日を見送ってくれるらしいねえどこまで行こうか空の落書きをなぞって名前もない街角を風が踊り抜けるほら手のひらのマップはまだ何も描かれていないだからこそ選べるよ笑って泣いてまた笑う道を裏返した声膝に重ねて少しだけ高く景色